For centuries, explorers and enthusiasts have scoured the globe looking for the exact same sunken empire. They have launched expeditions everywhere from the shallow waters of the Bahamas to the muddy coast of Spain, convinced that a sophisticated civilization is waiting to be found at the bottom of the sea. Yet every modern theory, sonar scan, and speculative map traces back to exactly one person. In 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote two dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, containing the first and only ancient mention of Atlantis. Plato didn't claim to have seen it himself. He wrote that an Athenian lawmaker named Solon heard the story generations earlier from Egyptian priests at Sais, who supposedly translated ancient records detailing the empire's existence. Plato provided granular details: a capital city built of concentric rings, temples plated in gold and orichalcum, and a navy of 1,200 ships. He placed this empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, and claimed it vanished in a day and night of earthquakes and floods around 9600 BCE. Plato insisted within the text that his story was entirely true. But while millions of dollars are still spent dragging sonar equipment across the ocean floor, the global scientific consensus points out a massive problem. We have been looking in the wrong academic discipline entirely. If a landmass larger than Libya and Asia combined sank into the Atlantic Ocean, the Earth itself would carry the receipts. Instead, modern geology and geophysics show that such an event is a physical impossibility. At the mid-Atlantic ridge, tectonic plates pull apart to create new seafloor, spreading outward, not collapsing downward. Furthermore, because buoyant continental crust is fundamentally lighter than dense oceanic crust, a massive continent physically cannot sink into the basin below. The scientific community began to close the door on a physical Atlantis back in 1882. Researchers took microscopic samples from St. Paul's Rocks, a cluster of islets in the mid-Atlantic, to see if they contained continental minerals. They found nothing but volcanic peridotite. The HMS Challenger oceanographic expedition further mapped the region, proving that islands in the middle of the ocean are actually volcanic peaks built from the seafloor up by eruptions. They are not the surviving mountaintops of a drowned continent. The Atlantic Ocean basin has existed in its current form for over 100 million years. Because the geology confirms no landmass has ever submerged there during human history, searching the water for physical ruins yields absolutely nothing. Recognizing the geological dead end, some scholars look for real-world historical events that might have inspired the myth. The strongest candidate is the Minoan Civilization, a sophisticated maritime society based on the Mediterranean island of Crete. Around 1600 BCE, the nearby Thera volcano detonated. It was one of the largest eruptions in recorded history, causing massive tsunamis that devastated Minoan coastal settlements. It provides a real example of an advanced island culture facing sudden, watery destruction. But equating the Minoans to Atlantis requires ignoring almost everything Plato actually wrote. The timeline is off by 8,000 years. Crete is in the Mediterranean, not the Atlantic, and the Minoans were a largely peaceful trading network, not a militaristic empire intent on conquering Europe. To force the evidence to fit, modern fringe researchers routinely ignore these discrepancies, relocating their searches to places completely disconnected from the text, like the Caribbean. This leads to highly publicized false claims, like the famous Bimini Road in the Bahamas. Enthusiasts claimed these underwater stones were a paved Atlantean highway. Geologists proved it is simply a natural formation of beach rock that fractures into regular geometric blocks over time. We are left with a stark reality. There is no geological evidence. There are no pre-Platonic records. The empire is historically absent. We have to stop asking where Atlantis is and start asking why Plato fabricated it. Within classical scholarship, the answer is well established. Plato wasn't writing a historical chronicle. He was writing a philosophical dialogue. Atlantis is a political allegory, a fictional tool designed to make a point. Plato wrote the Timaeus and Critias in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War. Athens, his home city, had become a ruthless, overextended maritime empire, and it suffered a crushing, humiliating defeat as a direct result of its own imperial aggression. Plato constructed the Atlanteans as the ultimate villains, to mirror the flaws of his own society. He wrote them as a once virtuous people who grew corrupted by extreme wealth and unchecked military power, eventually facing the wrath of the gods for their hubris. To defeat this fictional superpower, Plato needed a hero, so he invented a primeval, perfectly disciplined version of ancient Athens to lead the resistance. This mythical version of Athens matched all the political and moral ideals Plato argued for in his other philosophical works. Plato used the mythos of Atlantis as a mirror. He was warning his fellow citizens about the inevitable destruction that follows political greed, using a dramatic story to shape their morality. During the Middle Ages, the allegory largely faded from active debate in Europe, but when Renaissance scholars rediscovered Plato's texts, the narrative shifted. Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic and found entire landmasses unknown to Europe, sparking speculation that these new lands might be the Lost Empire. The myth mutated into a modern obsession in 1882. A writer named Ignatius Donnelly published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, an immediate sensation that influenced generations of readers and redefined the legend for a new century. That literalism birthed an entire industry of pseudo-archaeology. Explorers continue to burn through millions of dollars chasing sonar anomalies because they are reading a piece of ancient moral philosophy as if it were a modern textbook. In the search for stone walls and golden artifacts, the actual point of the story vanished. We spent centuries treating a philosopher's brilliant warning about political greed as a literal treasure map.